We're back in the Agriland tent, and originally we had hoped this panel discussion would be focused on the EU-Mercosur trade deal, and we will get to a question on that. But first, we again want to stick with what's going on in the beef sector in Ireland at the moment, following on from the agreement that was reached at the weekend. To discuss this, I'm joined by Eddie Punch, the General Secretary of the ICSA, Independent TD for Roscommon Galway, Michael Fitzmaurice, and Fianna Fáil's agricultural spokesperson, Charlie McConalogue. Eddie, if I can come to you first, you were inside around the table for the talks, for both rounds of talks, and agreement was reached on this deal by all the farm lobby groups involved and all the stakeholders. Should farmers be satisfied with what is being offered in this agreement?
I don't think, Claire, that any farmer could be satisfied with the state of the beef trade at the moment. The reality is it is totally unsustainable for farmers to be expected to produce beef at current prices. It is totally unrealistic to demand that farmers are delivering all sorts of add-on benefits like sustainable grass-fed beef, high animal welfare standards, and do all of that under strict quality assurance regulations. None of that is sustainable. So no farmer can be satisfied with where the beef trade is at. And so when you have a scenario where for many years now supermarkets and processors have been squeezing the farmer more and more, it is inevitable that if you won't allow peaceful negotiation and discussion to thrive, then protest and militant protest becomes inevitable. However, I think in terms of the talks we had at the weekend, we have to put a certain amount of context and perspective on it, and we need to be straight about what has actually happened. The talks were, of course, held in Ag House, chaired by the Minister and the Secretary of the Department, in a scenario where previous talks had broke down, but also in a scenario where the Competition Authority, in our view in ICSA, had taken a particularly extreme interpretation of competition law. And we went into those talks hamstrung, if you like, by the strictness of competition law, which is appropriate for big companies, but really absurd to apply to small family farms. And we also went in knowing that we weren't going to be totally hamstrung by the Competition Authority, but if a written agreement was done in the end, we could not have a written agreement that would be struck down as illegal straight away. We also went in there knowing that a lot of people were highly concerned about the whole quality assurance specification. So the specs that provide bonuses for cattle were seen as desperately unfair because there was nothing for over 30-month cattle, and because 44% of steers did not qualify for a quality assured bonus. But hand in hand with that is a bigger sense that there are a whole regime of things conspiring against the farmer getting a fair price. And in our view, this is a battle in a longer war where Europe has to step up to the plate and say the way in which the food industry, and in particular the beef food chain, is set up is rigged unfairly against the primary producer. So that's the context. Now just let's talk about the deal. After we went in there at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning and stayed there negotiating throughout the night until 4 o'clock the next day. And these talks were conducted in parallel rooms because of the fact that there was the threat of injunctions, there was all of this stuff going on. And a lot of key things were achieved in that agreement, and I'll just explain. People say you didn't discuss base price and therefore you were stupid. Base price could not be delivered in one fixed price for everybody. That would not wash. It wasn't attainable because it would have been seen as illegal and struck down straight away. So in that scenario, we did as much as we could around the bonuses to try and get a better price for farmers. And in the bonuses, an extra, the under 30-month bonus went up 20 cent to 20 cent. The over 30-month bonus went up from nothing to 8 cent. So for the first time ever, the principle that cattle over 30 months of age are entitled to a bonus was established. And we in ICSA, by the way, have just released our Red Sea survey today, which shows that 1,000 consumers, only 1 in 8 even consider the 30-month to be an important criteria. So these are important wins. But there's a lot more to say about it, and the detail is in the document, so we've got to see where we go with that.
Michael, I'll have to bring you in. As Eddie mentioned, base price wasn't up for discussion in the talks throughout the entire process. Yet that remains the big talking point today, actually, at the Ploughing. That is what everyone is still talking about. How can this situation move forward, and how can we progress it at this stage with this agreement? Producer groups, what's next in order to get the farmers back in a stronger position?
Well, I think the first thing that needs to be realised is what Eddie outlined there. He's correct in what he said. You don't shoot the messenger. In fairness to everyone that went in trying their best for the farmer. Unfortunately, it hasn't been accepted at the different factories around the country where people are protesting. I think we need to look at new ideas. One thing I've thrown out today is that the beam scheme hasn't been taken up fully. I believe there may be 10 million or more left there. Is there an opportunity over the next 4 or 5 weeks for the 200,000 cattle that may be killed? And you have one side where factories aren't killing, and you have the other side where there's a lot of cattle that need to be killed, and sheep as well. And we need to find a resolution to this because farmers needs to get livestock killed. We need to be getting our meat out of the country. And I believe that if the minister, and I'm not saying he can do this, but I believe there may be an opportunity where there is a budget there that may not be taken up, that may be able to help the situation. Under the producers group, and many are familiar with the producers group, there is always a deal done in be it sheep, be it cattle, and that may be an avenue, but unfortunately so far the factories don't seem to have taken to that. I think it's a time for reflection by everybody, but we do need to get this solved one way or the other. We have to get a resolution to it, because farmers in this country are on their knees. Beef farmers are on their knees at the moment. We see, and it's questionable, and I've spoke about this many times, Hungarian beef in this country with Bord Bia stickers on it. We see now beef that was slaughtered and basically cut up in the UK. Is that what we want to see? And I think a whole transparency, and in my view, a full inquiry needs to be done into the whole beef industry. What has gone on over the years? Because let's be honest, this didn't happen in the last year or two. 20 years in the making. You're not going to solve it with people in a room for 10 or 15 hours. There are certain things there that, in fairness, will have more transparency down the road, will take time to do. You're not going to turn on a light switch tomorrow and solve it all. But my God, we do need a thorough investigation to what's gone on over the years.
Charlie, we don't have a date for a general election, but we all know it mightn't be too far off. This will undoubtedly be an issue for Fianna Fáil representatives on the doorsteps all around rural Ireland. What is Fianna Fáil's position on this agreement? And like Michael and Eddie have outlined, it's a long process to try and rectify what's going on in the beef sector. What is Fianna Fáil's position on the agreement, and what is your vision for reforming the sector long term?
Well, I think first and foremost we need to see transparency put into the sector, because for many, many years now that hasn't been there. And if you even look at the various estimations of the margin that farmers receive from the food chain, that goes from anything from 20%, where the beef plan maintained, to Bord Blia telling us that it's 60%. So that massive range in there, which people are saying the percentage that goes to farmers shows how little transparency there is in the food supply chain. and that has just left farmers exceptionally frustrated. And of course, against the backdrop now of difficult international conditions, the price has dropped to a stage which makes it totally unsustainable. So the bottom line is, going forward, we need a situation where there is a margin and there is a return for farmers, and also alongside that a transparent price market. Now, I think farmers have made their stand, and they have said that there is no way that they can accept this into the future. But we also have to find a way where that actually there is a conclusion to it, and there is wins for it, and there is a way in terms of addressing those issues over the next number of months. So I think right now there's the 7 farm organisations signed up to the deal over the weekend, and there is negotiations and engagement going on among the farm organisations and farmers across the country, and particularly farmers in the picket. And we need to see more engagement now over the next number of days and a period of time to actually assess that and actually find a way to bring it to a conclusion. But bottom line is, going forward, we need to see a sustainable price. The other thing, like we saw, I think the faith in the government and the faith in the political system is diminished as well, and that's because we haven't seen the government actually respond appropriately to various crises that farmers have experienced over the last period of time. For example, the fodder crisis. It was ignored and denied for a long time, the grain crisis before that, and likewise now in relation to the beef crisis. And even like a week before the general election, the €100 beef emergency aid measure scheme was announced, and that was presented at that stage to farmers as being 100 million to actually address the losses they'd experienced. And as soon as the election was over, it was then laden with qualifications and the 5% stock reduction, which really showed farmers that they were sort of only paid attention to before the election, and even in that case misled. So I think now, with the farm organisations, and particularly I think the factories do need to look at how they can improve the base price that's there. But listen, that isn't able to be talked out in relation to talks. The farm organisations have got wins in relation to that, and over the next few days they need to engage further now with people to actually see how it can actually be brought to an end which actually gets gains for farmers.
Unfortunately, this is a short panel discussion, and there's so much we could talk about on this, but can I just ask the three of you just one final question? You have huge knowledge on what's going on at the moment. You've all been on the picket lines. You know exactly what's going on. You're in the room. You're talking to farmers. You're out here talking to farmers all day. In your view, based on your knowledge, based on what you've seen of the agreement, based on the communication that's been had now between all the stakeholders, do you think the pickets should stand down?
Claire, the reality is that we get a lot more phone calls in the last few weeks from people who are really, really worried about how they're going to put bread on the table. They need to sell cattle. And we have to find a resolution, because if they can't sell cattle, they can't come back and buy stores and weanlings. So this is half-time. Just before half-time, there's a point on, and you should take the point rather than going for the goal you're not going to get. But there's still a second half, and there's further round robins as well. But people have to get cattle killed. So I think
yes?
I think the protests have done a great job in shaking the factories, but farmers, we can't cut our nose off to spite our face.
Okay, Michael.
Claire, last Sunday night, when some of the different reps came back, I saw one of them trying to explain the deal in a place. I didn't like the way they were being, basically they were nearly left in a situation that they were being shot as the messenger. I stood up and I said, read the document, go through it. This may be the best deal that's there, but the reality of it is, whether Eddie or Michael or Charlie believe that they should or they shouldn't, in the last night and the night before, people have stood at gates. They have decided that whether we say it or the farming organisation say it so far, that they're not standing down. And when you have a situation like that, you have got to make sure that you find a resolution to it. And I think over the next few days, we have got to find a resolution to it.
Charlie, your view, do you think that the time has come for the pickets to stand down, or?
I think we have to look at what the reality is, that there has to be an outcome to this which actually has gains for farmers, and also the fact that over the weekend the 7 farming organisations negotiated what they felt, taking on board the engagement they had and the backdrop to it, what was the best outcome at this time, and actually shows a pathway there for over the next 3 months in terms of a task force being set up and in terms of fully examining the beef market to ensure transparency is brought to it, that actually is actually achieved, particularly, for example, your 4 movement rule, your 30-month age limit, which and also your 70-day residency, properly examining those, and if there is no rationale for them, seeing that they actually get stood down. But ultimately now, I think over the next couple of days, and I know it's been happening the last day or two, those farming organisations need to engage further with farmers across the country, with their members, with those in the picket line, in terms of actually explaining that deal and dealing with it, and actually achieving a managed outcome. And it's not, as Michael said, they're not looking to the politicians as such to say what should happen, but listen, there needs to be a managed outcome. The deal is on the table. The 7 farm organisations have signed up to it, and nobody else has put an alternative there. So that needs to be given serious consideration, because, listen, if this continues for any more amount of time, it harms everyone and it undermines the whole industry.
Just finally, just on that, Michael, I know we were meant to discuss Mercosur here, but you made an interesting point there before we started, that if this continues...
In my opinion, when you look at the status, there's 100,000 families basically relying on, be it beef and sheep farming. You know, people have talked about Mercosur and where we're going. We are at a stalemate at the moment where farmers have lost their shirts in the last few years on the beef sector. You could be facing into a situation in the coming years, and for people that as youngsters going into farming, to scratch their head and to wonder what will they tell them what to do. We talk about Mercosur, and in my opinion, that deal should be dead in the water. But we could see a situation, if farmers don't make a viable and sustainable income in this country, that we'll be bringing meat in from Brazil and other places at a lesser quality, because unfortunately our farmers will have left the system. And is that the Ireland and is that the Europe we want, or are we going to make decisions to make it sustainable for the beef farmer going into the future?
Okay, look, to the 3 of you, thank you all very much for joining us, and we're going to continue to watch this and discuss this issue very closely over the next 3 days and beyond. Thanks very much, and thanks to everybody for coming into the tent. We'll be back soon.